Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you enjoyed your snow day, but if you haven't figured it out yet, that means that you kind of missed your at school day. So, that blue day was kind of gone, and now we're on a white day. So, what I'm going to do today is kind of present to you what I would have in class. That way, we're kind of caught up with each other. And so, you're going to watch along in this Ed puzzle and kind of get a feel for starting our new unit, which is all about the country of China. And like we usually do, what we're going to do is kind of build, as I say, as where I put it, build China from the ground up. That is to say, start with some history, knowing about the country and how that history impacts or shaped the country today. So as it says here, you are going to want to take materials out for notes. There's also something posted in your Google Classroom that's been there since Monday, which is an article analysis, and that's due Friday for point recovery. So basically, the idea is if you don't like the way your Israel test or summative or assessment, whatever you want to call it, you don't like the way that turned out, you can do an article analysis, and that would boost points. So doing one article analysis, and if it's done well, 15-point recovery. Two article analysis would be 30 total of 30-point recovery. So this is point recovery. This is not extra credit. Okay, you don't get points over the top. It's for recovering points you did not get for the summative. And there's a video explaining that more in that assignment. So your fact of the day. That again, your fact of the day, you should be writing those down somewhere. China has the longest continuous civilization in the world, meaning there's been a lot of old civilizations around the world. Some are older than China, but they haven't been around as long. So China's civilization has stuck around basically the longest from start, and we don't have an endpoint yet. So it's the longest continuous civilization. So that's why it doesn't say it's like the oldest necessarily, because it's not, but as in starting and continuing on, it is the longest continuing civilization. So some information about China. So I know that you guys have covered China to some extent in your social studies classes, but that's basically, as they say, ancient history. It's much older than where we are, of course. So the main focus of this class would be talking about China today, but few historical events to kind of understand it a little bit more. So our history for China is going to be much more recent, starting in the 1900s. So keep that in mind. I know some students get confused because they see and hear like China and China and China and China, but my class or world cultures is much more contemporary, much more modern. So we're only going back to the 1900s to kind of understand how that last 100 years has shaped China. Okay, so starting off, I'm just going to show you a picture. So this is a real political cartoon that was actually published in a newspaper right around the year 1900. Okay, so political cartoons are supposed to be in a way funny, but also real commentary or real observations of what's going on in the world. So we still have political cartoons today. This was one that was published in newspapers back around the year 1900. So obviously the things you can see is that there's a large egg labeled China, and there's these bird people hovering around the egg or on the egg or sniffing around the egg. Now, if you look closely, you can see that these bird people are labeled with countries. So this one is labeled England, this one Germany, this one France, back here is Italy, this is Russia, this is Austria, this is Japan back here, and this is the United States. Okay, so this is giving commentary on what we know about Chinese history, which is these foreign countries that weren't China, came to China and basically wanted to use China as a source of resources and wealth. Okay, so in a more concrete way, what did that actually look like? So up here, this is titled Colonial Powers Carve Up China, 1850 to 1910. Okay, so we're in that time zone. So the red line was supposedly what the country of China was, what they controlled. But you see that a lot of these areas are shaded in light colors. This is like a pink, green, yellow, etc. So those are spheres of influence over here. Okay, so what that means is different countries control different parts of China. and they didn't like want to take over the land like, hey, this is now our country, but they were using that land as a resource grabber. Okay, so saying we don't necessarily want to come in and take it over, but we're going to use it to make ourselves wealthier. So this was the British in the light green, France yellow, light purple was Japan, pink was Russia. So they would say basically, hey, we control this area, and basically anything valuable we're going to get. So China was kind of helpless when this was happening. These foreign countries coming in and taking over China or kind of controlling those areas, China was helpless. And the Chinese call this basically this period of time, their 100 years of shame. So what had happened historically was that for a very, very long time, China was way ahead of other civilizations as far as development. So if you think of the development of a civilization as kind of like a race, China in that race would have been winning a long time, like way up in the front. Okay, but as the race continued, okay, China's pace kind of slowed down. Other countries sped up, and eventually you have China being passed, being in development. So these other countries who eventually became more developed than China, and part of that means better technology, and part of that means better militaries, kind of could come in here and do whatever they wanted in China because China didn't have the abilities or the technology to resist effectively. They tried to, didn't work out so well for them. So what you get is this as a result. Okay, so this is an important concept in Chinese history where they have this history of being bossed around by foreign countries, like foreign countries coming in and doing basically whatever they wanted. So that's an important concept to kind of understand about Chinese history. Another way to look at it is here in this political cartoon, different political cartoon, but maybe more effective to see this artist showing what was happening. So you have, instead of bird people, you have world leaders sitting around at a table. And at the table is basically a pizza. And that pizza is labeled Chine or China. So basically, these world leaders are cutting up China and kind of, they might look like they're kind of arguing a little bit, but they're fighting for the best pieces of China. And so you have Queen Victoria, you have an Austrian general, you have a Russian czar, Japanese samurai, and this is Lady Liberty for the United States, kind of looking over shoulders, not directly involved, but kind of aware of what's going on. And in the background, you have someone that's supposed to represent basically the Chinese people, kind of throwing his hands up and saying, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. These people are cutting up my country, but I don't even have a seat at the table. And really that was their Chinese history in a nutshell. They couldn't affect what was going on, and these other countries were coming into China and doing what they wanted. Okay, so that is a big dynamic that still affects Chinese culture and civilization today. So as a recap, and here you want to, maybe write a few things down, you have this shift. So basically the Chinese realized that the way they were running things wasn't working anymore. Okay, so again, like we just talked about, foreign countries pushed around China. So we know they came in and they kind of did what they wanted to. So what happened to those foreign countries? Because they're not there anymore. Well, World War II hit the world, and to some part World War I. But when you're having a world war, you can't be messing around in someone else's country. You need those resources, and you need those people and all that stuff back to your country, defend your country, and help with a war effort. So most countries just kind of said, okay, we're going to let China do China. Unfortunately, though, China was fully invaded by Japan. So I talked about there's a difference between, those spheres of influences about kind of taking over and using land for resources and actually fully controlling it. Well, China was invaded by Japan. And if you remember or know a little bit about world history, in World War II, that was one of our enemies in World War II, is the Japanese, because they attacked us. So fast forward, Japan lost World War II, but it's important to note that they were invaded, like Japan invaded the country fully with troops to try to take over China, okay? So the end of World War II was a huge shift in how China was run. So you guys talk about in your social studies classes how China used dynasties. They used emperors and empresses as the top leader, and those leaders, whatever they said, went, and that's how China was run, with a lot of bureaucrats. Okay. Well, obviously, China wasn't so strong anymore. Things weren't working out, so they decided to try something else, which was communism. So, complete change of how China's running things, and they wanted to try something different. They wanted to try communism. So, the question is, what is communism? We have a little bit of a problem there. So what is communism? Okay, so let's break it down. A textbook definition of communism is a belief in a classless society. So we're not talking about school classes here. What we are talking about here is social classes. So most societies have basically three categories of social classes. You have an upper class, you have a middle class, and you have a lower class. So when you think about what an upper class is, basically an upper class is a group of people in the society that have more stuff, they have more money, they have more power, they have more influence, or they have the most of that stuff. That makes them upper class in a nutshell. And then on the flip side, the lower class are people who have less stuff, less money, less power, less influence. Okay, so communism was trying to get rid of the classes. By getting rid of classes, basically, you don't have people with more, you don't have people with less. Everyone has the same. So in order to do that, you need to get rid of private ownership. So that people can't build wealth up and become an upper class, you get rid of people owning things privately. And things are shared by the community. And that's the base word here. Community communism. Community communism. So they're shared out. So you don't have people who have more because everyone's sharing everything. And you don't have people who have less because everyone's sharing everything, right? Everyone has what they need. The way I kind of sum it up is everyone shares everything equally. That's the ideal communist setup. So this is like the textbook definition. So this is what China wanted to kind of apply to themselves, and they made huge changes to do that. Now, again, that's what they wanted to do. That's not necessarily how it all turned out, but this is basically like the textbook definition of what communism is. So if you think of communism as a board game, this is kind of obviously not a real board game, but the goal would be to distribute all money among the players. Where in the real board game, Monopoly, the goal is to have all of the money, all the property, and everyone else is bankrupt. So communism, in a way, is almost like opposite to the idea of the Monopoly game. Okay. So this guy was the guy who made these huge changes in China towards communism. So basically, he was the leader who did all these changes. So you don't have to write this down or anything, but I do want to introduce this gentleman here. So his name is Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong, not Mayo. It's not Mayo. I hear some students say that. It's Mao Zedong. So you got to give this guy some respect. I know this is him on the right. He doesn't maybe look like much to you, but he had a huge amount of influence and made huge changes in China. So we got to give him the respect that he's due. Okay. So Mao Zedong is unquestionably the most well-known figure in modern Chinese history. Mao led a revolution in 1949, which ended China's 100 years of shame, which is that period of time we referenced, by Western powers and laid the foundations of the rapidly developing nation of the early 21st century. He's also responsible for 20 to 50 million Chinese deaths. That's a lot of people who died under his watch, essentially. And that hopefully is a little bit of an eye-opening number to you. And many Americans don't even know about this guy because basically all of these deaths and all of these changes and all of these things that he's responsible for happened within China. Okay. And so it's all happened and kind of locked up in China. We didn't really hear about it. And he tends not to be covered as well as he should be in world history. So huge object of, or he's the reason for so many changes in China. Okay. So here you have someone once described him as 30% bad, 70% good. So he's a complicated historical figure in that he did some good stuff, but he also did some bad stuff. I would say he did a lot of bad stuff or things that weren't great compared to the stuff that was good, but he's still very much in the Chinese culture now. He's like a modern founding father. So he's not alive anymore. He died in 1976, but he's like kind of like a more recent founding father to the country because he made so many changes. So he did do some good stuff. He kicked out foreign armies. He was a general and helped defeat the Japanese and things like that, which helped unify and kind of tie China back together after it had been kind of divided up as part of that 100 years of shame. He basically was the leader of making those communist changes in China, which you could argue is a good or bad thing, but he's also responsible for a lot of deaths. So he started these programs. The programs weren't about like going out and just killing people, right? But he started these programs that were supposed to help China, ended up killing a whole bunch of people. So very complicated picture. So he very much, if you walk around China today, he's still around. He's not someone that Chinese people try to forget. He's, they know he's responsible for a lot of deaths, but they also give him a lot of credit for changing China and shifting China in the way it was operating. So here's Mao Zedong. He's on the Forbidden City here, and this picture of him is very large. To give you a sense, this archway here can fit about 10 people shoulder to shoulder. So this picture is very big, and they repaint it and rehang it every year so it doesn't get aged or anything like that. So this is ongoing. And actually, even their currency. Here you go. You have Mao on every single piece or every bill, not their coins, but every bill Mao Zedong is on. So he's one of those guys you won't be able to get away from. You're always kind of hear him mentioned or see him around the country because, good or bad, he really did shape and change the way China was. Okay. So you guys obviously Monday found out some basic facts of China today. So you're kind of using this historical reference as a backdrop about understanding China as we move on. Okay. So that's it for this Ed puzzle. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you had any questions about what was covered.